One of the teaching sessions I most enjoyed when I was teaching on the Guildford GP training scheme involved making custard. I would always put on an apron, not because I needed it, but made me feel like I was on Bake Off, which was always a good thing. And then I would talk to the trainees a bit about custard while I mixed it up. Obviously you make custard with milk, but I was a bit of a cheapskate, and this session works just as well with water, so I would use water. And while I was mixing it, I would ask the trainees whether many of them use custard or ate custard, and interestingly, very few did these days, or if they did, it would come out of a tin. So not many people were used to mixing custard powder like this, some would be. And you generally have to keep talking while you mix it up. So just finish this, I've just got to make sure it's all nicely dissolved. And the trainees would be thinking, what on earth is he doing now? I used to often take props when I went to teaching, and everyone in the office would think, oh, what's he up to these days? It's always good to keep people's interest by keeping them guessing. And then, once I'd found one of the trainees who'd never made custard before, and who I thought was going for a laugh, I would then invite them to join me, and I would take off my apron, and I would ask them to put the apron on, and then I'd go and stand back a while and make it look like I was a bit worried about what was going to happen next. And then I would ask them to punch the custard. And I'd say, can you just give a good punch? I'll make sure I've got it all here. And amazingly, they were generally going for a laugh. And they would look at this bowl of runny custard. And most of the time, with me standing back and sort of wincing slightly, they would have the courage to punch it. And they would punch it like that and be amazed. But actually, you can punch it really hard and it doesn't splash at all. And that's because custard powder mixed with the right amount of water or milk has this amazing quality where it's very runny when it's not under pressure, but as soon as you put it under pressure, it solidifies. And in fact, you can pick this stuff up and you can roll it in your hands. This does get a bit messy. You can roll it in your hands and it ends up like putty, and as soon as you stop, it turns back to liquid. And this is great fun. It's really feely stuff. You kind of want to keep on doing this. If you've got young children at home, or even older children, you've never made this stuff, then I'd really recommend it because it's great fun. And this custard, or this corn flour, it's actually the corn starch and the water or the liquid, forms a really interesting substance which is known as oobleck. It's named after a Dr. Seuss book, Bartholomew and the Oobleck, which is where Bartholomew, the protagonist, has to save the land from this green sticky stuff that's falling from the sky instead of rain. And this is yellow sticky stuff, and it's what's called a non-Newtonian fluid. So Newtonian fluids, things like oil, they only change their viscosity when you change the temperature. So when you heat up oil, then it becomes runnier. When it cools down, it becomes thicker. Whereas non-Newtonian fluids, they may change the viscosity with temperature, but they'll change the viscosity with other forces applied to them. So with cornstarch, when you apply pressure, it suddenly solidifies. It massively increases its viscosity and becomes like a solid. When the pressure is released, it becomes like a liquid again. And there's loads of non-Newtonian fluids. You know, why do we shake tomato ketchup? It's because when we give it that shake, it actually becomes less viscous, and that's why I can get to the bottom of the jar. Blood is a non-Newtonian fluid. There are lots of non-Newtonian fluids. But what's really interesting about this one is that under pressure, it stiffens. Now, why do we teach that? What's that got to do with general practice? Well, we used to teach it because stiffening to resistance is a really common part of human interaction. And that when we are put under pressure, we will often harden our position. And it's a really common thing that we encounter in general practice. Now, we used to teach it as part of a motivational interviewing session. Motivational interviewing is all about behavioural change, so helping someone to stop smoking or stop drinking or change their habits. And one of the first principles of motivational interviewing is to roll with resistance. In other words, when you meet resistance, don't keep pushing, because the more you push, the more you punch this custard, the more resistance you're going to get. So you need to roll back, and then it softens, and then you try another way. And resistance is more than just behavioural change that we see in general practice. Sometimes it may not be a big issue at all. So sometimes you might be asking someone if they'd like painkillers for their back pain, and they just say, oh no, I'm not a pill taker. That's resistance, but it's fine, because there's no great need for them to take pills. And what you can do is quickly roll with it, move on to something else, rather than waste time talking about painkillers. Well, what if the thing that you're trying to negotiate with the patient is much more important than that? What if they're having a severe asthma attack and they really need some steroids because otherwise they could end up in hospital or worse? But they're resistant, they're worried about the word steroid. And there it becomes more of an issue, because you can't just move on and say, you don't fancy steroids, let's leave it. In the Two Houses model, which I've described in the book, The GP Consultation Reimagined, I talk about something called Room 101. So this is where the GP and the patient are trying to decide what to do next, and they're facing a room that is like Room 101, in other words, a room that the patient doesn't want to go into. But crucially, it's a room that's very important. So it's like there's a decision in that room, in this case, steroids for acute asthma, and you need to go into that room in order to get the benefit from steroids and not take the risk of leaving your asthma untreated. But crucial to it is not only would it be dangerous to ignore this room, but the patient is resistant to it. And then we need a whole different skill set as to how do you help negotiate with that patient to help them hopefully get into Room 101 feeling less frightened about it, have a greater understanding of why it's important, put it into perspective without just bullying them. And sometimes you can see doctors are very tempting to just try to bully them into Room 101 and get more and more draconian, more and more forceful, and scare them into 101. And that works sometimes, but very often you just meet resistance, and there are far better ways of doing it. Sometimes we need to just step back when we meet resistance, listen to the patient and understand their fears before we can maybe find another way around. So I think one of the key skills for any GP in negotiating with patients is to be alert to the signs of resistance, the non-verbal cues, and immediately rethink when we're spotting resistance and think, well, maybe we're not quite on the right track here, maybe we have to listen a bit more, maybe we have to find different ways of negotiating, and that way we can get the best outcomes for our patients. If you want to know more about that, then there's more on the website, www.twohousesgp.com, and obviously in the book it's expanded on a lot further. Thank you for listening.